Good evening. It is Wednesday, July 24th, 2024, 6 p.m. I'd like to call to order the Board of Commissioners' regular workshop meeting. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor Brooks,
Here.
Vice Mayor Taglerini,
Here.
Commissioner Kerr,
Here.
Commissioner McGeehan,
Here.
Commissioner Gavayi,
Here.
all are present.
Thank you. Public comment. Public participation is encouraged. If you are addressing the commission, step to the podium and state your name and address for the record and the organization or group you represent. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and do not include any topic on the agenda. Public comment on agendas will be allowed when they come up. If you would like someone at the city to follow up on a comment or question made at the meeting, you may fill out a comment card with the contact information and give it to the city manager. Comment cards are available at the back table in the commission chambers. Completing a comment card is not mandatory. Do we have any public comment? Having no public comment, we will move on to our first item, which is the Board of Commissioners Mayor Commission Pay.
Mayor, Commission, you have in the packet a little brief survey. Thank you to the clerk's office for compiling, showing some comparisons with some of our neighboring jurisdictions. But this item is, I think, as a result of some resident input regarding to take a look at the pay structure. Currently, the mayor's rate of compensation, annual compensation, is $10,000 and commissioners are $7,500. So really that's kind of a discussion. It's listed in our charter, obviously, that you are to be compensated, and it goes a little bit over the process and what the salary ranges are. And of course, they've been updated via ordinances over the years. But really, this item is up to all of you if what you think any changes should be made. There is a time period. They would not go into effect. I think it's at least a 6-month time period before any increases do go into effect. So in other words, you're kind of not giving yourself a raise, but subsequent time period into the future.
Commissioners, do you have any comments?
To that last point that Robin just made, so anything that we would pass, if it would pass in October, it would not be effective actually until 2026.
Yeah, it's listed here in the charter how the time period that any increase in salary shall become effective the date of commencement of the terms of commissioners elected at the next regular election, provided that such an election follows the adoption of an ordinance by at least 6 months. So you would have to adopt an ordinance for the increases, and at least 6 months have to elapse after. But if those 6 months go over the next election, then it would not take effect until the following year's election. So we are currently still more than 6 months out, but we're getting close because we could have a first reading in August and then the second reading in September, which would be right at about the 6-month period from the next regular election.
We would have to September to adopt it.
Yeah, it would need to be adopted in September at the September 14th regular meeting.
Commissioners, any other comments?
I've given my opinion on this before. I'm not interested in changing anything drastically, but I do want to make the point that I'm going to speak for myself. I'm retired. I don't need the income. And many boards, not ours, but many boards, the entire board is made up of retired people who don't need, or they are wealthy enough they don't need the income. Would it attract a different kind of person if we had at least enough of a salary to make it a decent second job? the case can be made that, well, we only put in every other week. Well, I'm sure that you guys spend more than 2 hours every other week doing your job. I know I put aside sometimes a whole day just to do the city work and then later on answer emails. Would we get a different kind of person if we offered at least enough for it to be a second job, right? They have a full-time job, but this would be a nice supplement. And I'm just throwing that out there because I feel like it might draw in some younger participation, frankly. So that's all. I'm not suggesting we do anything drastic. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
So I took what was provided by the city clerk, and I think it would have been better or nicer or more beneficial for us if all of the coastal communities had been listed on this. But I went and looked at their population of each city in 2022 to get an idea of where we are at in pay scale compared to our sister communities. And Indian Rocks Beach in 2022 had 3,658 residents, and St. Pete Beach had 8,798 residents. We had 3,948. When I look at that, it appears that we are in line with what other coastal communities that are comparable to us are paying. My personal opinion is that it is a civic duty. This isn't about somebody making a living or a supplemental income, in my opinion, sitting up here. We are only required to work 2 nights a month. Whether a commissioner chooses to attend additional meetings, be more involved in the community as a representative, that's up to us. And I think to offer a salary to attract someone to come and work just for the money isn't the idea of civic duty. And we all sit here and volunteer in various different ways. We all do different ways of giving to this city. But the real commitment is only twice a month. And you don't even have to come twice a month to stay in your seat. And I said this when we talked about other things, offering other benefits, was that my concern would be if we're offering more money or more things, are we attracting someone who's civically minded to serve the city? Or are we attracting someone who's after a paycheck? And I'm more inclined to keep it where it is. We actually pay more than our neighboring cities that are on this particular sheet we were provided in comparison to residents. And I think that we should all be really proud that we get to sit here. It's an honor. That is my opinion.
Well, I don't think anyone, whether you're a millionaire or not, is going to turn down a raise, even if it's a small one. I believe in any field, we need to stay a little bit competitive with our neighbors. And I believe that we should offer at least another 3,000 to the commissioners. Or the number can be different, but something to attract more people to get into politics for our city. I love Madeira Beach. I'm not doing it for the money. I love our beaches. I love our community. I love our people. I go to almost everything I can go to just to be a part of this city. And looking forward to working with everyone here in the near future. So thank you.
Well, I'm here to give back. I'm very civic minded. I love my community. I'm not here because of money. I'm here because I feel it's a duty that, we should have to serve our community. I am not in favor of a raise.
Great points made by all. And that's the dilemma, attracting people. And is it going to attract the right people? One question is the Board of Commissioners part of the civil service study that we approved? Or is it just staff? Do you know?
The compensation,
Yeah,
no,
well,
just the staff. Yeah,
just the
you're-
staff.
Just the staff.
Okay. I was hoping that they could give a recommendation. And I was hoping I could kick the can because of that. And it wouldn't impact anything until 2026, given that you need the 6 months. Since that's not an option.
Well, I think if you just take what we were provided, Madeira Beach, Indian Rocks, and St. Pete Beach, we are the highest paid city by quite a number.
Well, not
Or
necessarily.
the mayor is, excuse me, the mayor is.
Not necessarily, not, well, when you take just those three.
Just
yeah,
those three,
just those
because
three.
the other municipalities aren't really coastal communities to
Right,
us.
right.
Um,
No, I agree. And I'm happy with the way everything is. Everyone here on the board is doing it for the right reasons. We have a great board. Everyone's here to give back and to try to give their vision of what the city should be, make the right decisions for the city because this is our home. And that's the type commissioner that you want to attract. Now, it is tough to get commissioners. It's, I think, the year that Commissioner or Vice Mayor Taglerini and I ran was the last time we really had competition in the races. That was the same year that Mayor Rostek was in. We all had competition, but there hasn't been any competition in the last few years. But I would be I don't think a raise is going to make someone decide that they're going to run. I think we're just fine the way we are personally.
Mayor, if I could just make one follow-up comment, I just want to make sure that my discussion is not misrepresented. So I can speak with authority about my situation. Years ago, when we had a Board of Adjustment, I was on the Board of Adjustment. It was maybe a couple decades ago. 20 years ago. Oof,
I
that
saw
hurt.
your name.
So.
I saw your name.
And I resigned after about 6 months because I just couldn't do what I thought was the proper amount of work to do a good job. But in the back of my mind, I thought, when I retire, I'm going to run. I'm going to do something for this city because I love this city and I want to have an input on what goes on. If the salary had been more, I can speak with authority and say, I might have run sooner because I was working a full-time job. But I still wanted to do this. But if it was a supplement, it was extra money that would actually help me, it might have enticed me. So I'm not suggesting that anyone who should come get this job because it pays so well. Absolutely not. But if it supplemented them, we might get people who are interested but can't because they're full-time, they work full-time. So, I mean, like Commissioner McGeehan says, I mean, even just $3,000, somebody says, hey, that's $10,000. Man, I've always wanted to do that. This will supplement me. So I want to make sure my point is not misrepresented. I'm not trying to use money to attract people. I'm trying to make it a realistic opportunity for people to consider. That's all. Thank you for that extra comment.
Understood. Any other comments?
Do we have to vote? No.
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 Not at a work job.
This is just to have a discussion to see if we would want to bring it to a vote.
Do you any public?
Oh, yes. Do we have any public comment? We have no public comment. We will move on to the city manager parking garage.
Thank you, Mayor. And for several years, the city has had a capital project, or as a listing of it, included in its capital projects, a parking garage. And the original or location when I arrived a couple of years ago was at a city-owned surface parking lot on the west side of Gulf Boulevard at 130th Avenue West, which is sort of an L-shaped lot, a kind of an odd-shaped lot, has, I think, 75 parking spaces or approximately. It has been utilized and still utilized as a visitor parking lot. In the time that I've been here, I've received numerous, just in speaking with literally probably a couple of thousand visitors, dozens of, or probably a few hundred residents and dozens of businesses. It came to my attention, or having those discussions, that a parking garage would likely be a much better attraction, better utilized, and certainly provide a much more, provide more adequate parking and more of an economic benefit if such a structure would go in Johns Pass Village. So the item or the purpose of this discussion is to kind of go over with you and have your feedback, and certainly any public that's here, on the location, or if there's a preference for a location, or how to proceed. Also, if we want to proceed with a garage, I think the intent has been to proceed with one. But recently I had several folks say, well, you know, there's already a parking garage in the village. Yes, I'm aware. It is privately owned, but there is already a garage in Johns Pass Village and Boardwalk area. So regardless, this item, again, to show you a proposed location, what I just stated, an alternative to what was essentially the original location. There are, and I'll put up a map on the screen here in a moment. There are currently 3 property owners of the location. I guess I'm going to call it the alternative location, or the location in the village. The property owners being the City of Madeira Beach, Looper Real Estate and 13001 Gulf Boulevard LLC, and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Holiday Isle Post 4256. So the 3 owners. Between the 3 of them, there are 7 parcels, and just, I'm not in the community development department, although I should have asked them for a much more professional kind of listing, but we'll get a much more rather than the rudimentary of identifying. This is you go back to the previous one. The red area delineates a proposed area for the parking garage that's inside Johns Pass Village. It is bound by Gulf Boulevard on the west, 129th Avenue, 129th Avenue on the south side, and then Village Boulevard on the east side. So the area in effect is more of a triangular shape than anything else. Within that area, there are 7 parcels, as I stated, with 3 owners. Parcels 5, 6, and 7 on the eastern side of the triangle are the city-owned parcels. They are currently used as surface parking, and there is a structure that contains public restrooms, and then the rest of the structure is leased to an entity as a retail outlet, retail store. And then the remaining part up on parcel 5, kind of the small triangle, is really just open space. There's some picnic benches and some paved area and part of the sidewalk. On the west side of the large triangle, parcels 1 through 4, 1, 2, and 3 are owned by the 2 private entities that I mentioned, Looper Real Estate and the Gulf Boulevard 13001. Should have memorized them. 13001 Gulf Boulevard LLC, and then parcel 4, again owned by the Veterans of Foreign Wars, or the VFW. The 7 parcels are listed after the rudimentary map. the parcel number, the ownership, just the data obtained from the Pinellas County Property Appraiser's Office. Also shows that each parcel, with the exception of the city's surface lots, the surface lot or the majority of it, do have structures on them. All, 4 of the 5 structures are essentially retail outlets, or 1, 2, 5 of the 6. The 6th structure being the VFW, which houses their dining bar area, and then a conference room, some bathrooms, and some storage. But they're, again, when you go down to the parcel, their parcel, the square footage, almost 7,000 square feet, of which most of that is utilized for their members and then for a variety of public events. The remaining areas of the parcels, including the structures, are open to the public, mainly for retail, whether you're going in there to buy ice cream or a shirt or pant, some type of clothing or sundry items, or as in the case of the surface parking lots, to pay for parking, to enjoy everything around there. I have not totaled the entire square area. We do have a survey of the city-owned area, and I believe I know that Looper has surveys of their parcels. I will add the Looper and 13001 Gulf Boulevard, their ownership. I've had several meetings, conversations. They are very supportive and would like for this to continue. They would, for this to begin, excuse me. So much so that they have expressed interest in wanting to partner with the city up to and including even serving as a project manager over the entire, should we proceed, over the entire development, I'm going to call it, which would be a public-private partnership. You'd have agreement to go over, term sheets. I haven't discussed with any of you the financing of it. We've discussed briefly in some of our budget work sessions, estimates as to what a structure may cost, and then whether we would borrow money or issue bonds, that all would need to be determined, as well as who would be responsible for everything from the design to bidding to who would oversee construction, and all of those details would need to be worked out. The purpose of this is really to get some feedback from all of you as to, is this something we would like to proceed with? If so, we would then need to begin the process of determining how to proceed, what type of agreement, and who would, and work all of those details and terms out. I believe it would be very prudent as well to have at least 1 public meeting, probably 2, to obtain more public input on this proposed project, because it would likely change the character of the village in terms of there would be a sizable structure. The height, obviously there would be limits on the height, the number of stories, the number of size of parcels inside for retail, whether there would be any cafes or, other than what the VFW has, and all of those details to be worked out. The number of parking spaces would determine likely the height of the structure, among other details. Who would be responsible for the parking? I choose that the city be responsible for that, but just my suggestion. Of course, we have some revenue set aside to build a parking garage, and a couple of years ago, the parking hourly fee increase, the justification for it was to utilize that additional revenue to, in the future, fund a parking garage, which is what this is purporting to be. So those are kind of to try to summarize how and what this would do. Again, nothing has been done to this point, except having one-on-ones with you to explain that, hey, this is a possibility in lieu of the lot across the street on the west side of Gulf Boulevard. And I have met with representatives of Looper and 13001 Gulf Boulevard to discuss their thoughts of it. I've had brief discussions with the current VFW, I think if he's still the current VFW commander, David, to which, and so I have not gone into great detail with any of them, whether either Looper or VFW. But the VFW, David mentioned that they would want to keep they would like to stay open. They want to keep their, as he referred to it, their cantina, so their food bar area open for their members, which during construction, obviously, we would need, it would appear that we would need to find some sort of temporary location if we were to include them in this project. I think they would be, I don't know if they'd be 100% amenable. That remains to be seen. However, that's been his comment. He realizing something's going to change into the future, so they might as well, be a part of it. However, again, no details have been worked out. So before we go to any next steps, this is really back to all of you as to how we should proceed.
Do we have any public comment? Commissioners?
Mr. Gomez, I think you answered all my questions. One of them, the revenue from parking in this parking garage, is that for sure that the city would still get that revenue?
Well, that would be, I think that's
one of the things we
one of the
negotiate.
terms to negotiate, to work out. But from my perspective, it would be prudent that we do at least keep the majority, or if not all, of the revenue. Again, and also to retain ownership. So there are 4 separate owners, but 3 entities that own property and structures in this entire footprint. So that would need to be negotiated and all worked out with lots of lawyers and
Sure.
in the room to.
But as just with my familiarity of that spot, it seems like there are lots of areas where there's nothing. There's a lot of some open space. So if we do a partnership, commercial partnership, we might have actually more opportunities for businesses, right? They
Yeah,
could-
I think that would depend, yes.
We could,
And based on the number of parking spaces, the optimal number.
and we would get the revenue from that rental space also.
That's possibly, yes.
That's a possibility. And just, I know we've all talked about this in our meetings, but just the idea of having that parking on that side of Gulf Boulevard is appealing to me. And the public, the nice public restrooms maybe, and I know we want to keep our vibe, our style, but an updated version of that, I think, would be appropriate for that area. So on the surface, I like the idea.
If I might, I think it all starts with a concept drawing. Yes, I'd agree that having parking actually in the village versus across the street is ideal. That said, if the concept ruins the atmosphere of the village, well, then it's not so easy. It's not something we want to consider. So what I'd like to propose, and maybe we can bring it up at a future meeting to get it voted on, is actually putting in the budget to have a concept drawing, doesn't have to be totally detailed, but something that an architect can put together to what would this look like? We would have much better concept, it's such a, 200 to 500 spaces. Well, that's a big difference. How tall could it be that it's not gonna, we're gonna be talking about zoning in the area later in the meeting. So, how does that look to our thoughts about height in the village? But it all starts with that concept drawing and getting that done. And I think that's a first step, and I'd be excited to at least get to that step that we can talk about it and approach this almost as a PD, and you definitely have to have community input on it. with at least 2 meetings, I would think, once we get to that point.
Oh, definitely, I agree with that. We'd have to have some community input. Also, future discussions, we're just now proposing this and discussing about it. It looks like having that parking garage in the village would be a lot better and beneficial for everyone than on the beach. The parking garage, I would imagine would be probably 4 stories, right? 3 stories,
I think probably the max of the structure would be 4.
4. So my main concern is the businesses on the east side of the proposed triangle. Looks to me like all of those stores would be shut out of the picture as far as right now, that what I'm looking at, if I had a store on the east side, as a business owner of the proposed building garage, I wouldn't like it, but I mean, we're now just talking about how we can overcome that, but you know, for now it's a discussion, but I'm just saying that those stores look like they would kind of get the bad end of the apple, as far as I'm concerned.
And currently, I think an idea is to, or part of the discussion is Village Boulevard would, the question, would it remain open to vehicular traffic? I think I don't know 100%, but I'm kind of leaning toward it would. But I'm not an architect or an engineer to be able to determine, and your point about the view is going to be substantially different. You're going to be looking at, a minimum of a 3, but probably no more than a 4 level, in terms of feet, how tall, probably about, I'm guessing, probably no taller than 40 or 44 feet, and I forget the exact feet that we can go up in now that we're doing the activity center rezoning components, but all of those to take into account how that would be, and that reason to have public meetings, and likely a meeting just probably business owners in the village and physically out there and have some sort of concept design or a couple of them as to what it might look like. But it would have to be something, both within the character of the actual village and boardwalk, obviously, but something that's very, very appealing, I think, visually, so that you're kind of, I don't know if we go to the super wow concept, because those can be, very, very expensive, but we want to obviously be realistic and something that would be functional, that would work, and that really would transform this part of such a popular and busy attraction, not just for our residents, but the couple million people that visit every year. And of course, it comes with some pains and some heartache for a while, but we'll try to make it as less painful. But that, obviously nobody likes construction, but we'll have to deal with that. So there's, great, comments, and that's what we're looking to obtain.
I know from time to time, maybe parking would be short for the patrons. But are we hurting for parking? Or are we trying to bring revenue to the city? I think the character, as you had alluded to it, Robin, I think the character will tremendously change. And, why fix it if it ain't broken? I see the village right now, John's Pass, being extremely popular with tourism. I don't see why we should make changes to it, so I'm not in favor of it.
So I have a question. When the parking fund was first established and we did the increase, the conversation was to build a parking garage on the opposite side of the road, beach side, on the lot that we own. if we built a building on, this would be my question, if we built a building, a parking building there on that lot and built it to the maximum height that we are permitted, how many parking spots would we get? Because those would be 100% revenue to Madeira Beach, would be 100% dedicated to tourists, whether they were going to John's Pass or going to the beach. I can see a value in doing 500 spaces and maybe helping to clean up some of the parking that's on Pelican from the businesses where they get all jumbled back there and triple, quadruple parked, and it's sometimes a mess to look at. But I've also had conversations where residents are interested in getting parking down here closer to us. Could we get a parking garage down here by City Hall? I would be much more interested before we do any drawings or anything to have community involvement, to have a workshop before we spend any money and let the residents come in and voice their opinion. It seems to me that in the past, where we often fall short is not getting community input in the beginning of a project and waiting until we've already made some decisions and spent money. So I would be in favor of having a community workshop, getting the feel for the community, invite the business owners, see how everyone as a whole that would come and be involved, where they would have thoughts and processes, and then do something based off of that information.
Mayor, if I could interject one more thing. I love that idea. The more residential and resident input, the better. But I still think that if we're gonna go to them, even if we don't get an elaborate drawing, I think, well, for myself, it'll help me to see it, but I'm sure your average person isn't an architect or a designer. It'll help them to just get a broad idea. And I wonder if we couldn't put a limit on it and just get a drawing that's not, I guess, for better lack of a better word, not so expensive. Just to have something to take to the residential meetings.
I would agree, only because everyone's concept in the public meeting is going to be different of what we're considering. You know, in my mind's eye, we have, it would be very similar looking to some of the buildings we already have, with the railings and the porches. So you are disguising that it's even a garage. And then I don't know that I would care for it, but at least it would give me, I don't know which way my vote would go versus building the garage across the street. Problem with the garage across the street is if it's utilized, it's gonna constantly be a traffic problem with crossing across the street or an overpass, which I'm not in favor of. Again, that makes it a more commercial feel, but there is definitely a need for more parking. And we already know that, it's the second most revenue generating, item in our budget. So, I'm all for more parking. It's just what's the best way to do it? And without some sort of concept drawing, I'm not sure that I can be in favor or not in favor. It's hard to understand.
Well, currently, right now, I would think I would not, the residents actually, number one, should be here to communicate what they want, what the residents would like to see. And Mayor, you were right about having a community here to talk about it. But just like I was saying, like, all I can envision is a 4-foot building, even if we camouflage it. If you had one of those stores on the east side of that location, that wouldn't be fair to you, would it? Those stores wouldn't last a year. No one would even know they're there. So I'm not in favor of putting a 4-foot parking garage right there. Thank you.
I understand your comment on having something to look at, but I think before we have something to look at, we should have an idea whether or not the residents are even interested in having a 4-story building built on that. I mean, that's a large piece of property when you put it all together. And if you have a meeting and however many people show up and the consensus is they're against wiping all that away and building one humongous parking garage with ground floor retail, then there wouldn't be a need to even spend. And again, I'd be interested to know if we built the parking garage where they originally had indicated putting it, how many parking spots would you get? I mean, is it 100? Is it 150? Is it 400? How?
One concept that I found, I think, had 200 total
Okay.
spaces.
So I
was
think that's
four.
that's a good understanding of what you're going to get to add parking if you do it there. And then listen to the residents. If they've got a appetite for building something there, it's not an easy, I mean, there's multiple agreements that have to be made that takes a lot of what we're doing on that property out of us. It seems, I don't know that because we don't know what that would look like. But I definitely feel strongly that before we do anything, we should have an understanding whether or not the residents are involved or interested in doing that. And it is a lot of retail down there. It'd be interesting to see how the retail establishment feels also.
Yes.
Just the last comment. I mean, down on the main boulevard there, you do get some traffic on that second floor, but it's not nearly what you get on the at grade. So all the, so it's, my struggle is the open space between the buildings adds a value. Not having that open space between the buildings, how does that impact the feel of the village? And I'll take it one step further. We talked about actually on the boardwalk itself, why do we need space between the buildings? But I was thinking about it the other night. Sometimes that break gives a different feel than the whole, not necessarily from on the boardwalk, but from looking up to the boardwalk. Because an old fishing village might have individual structures side by side with a pass through. So it's not, I'm not an architect either. All I know is it's our main attraction, and we want to supplement it. We don't want to take away from it. So need more discussion.
Well, if I could add, with the feedback I've been getting from visitors, and that's our majority priority. I mean, of course, it's the residents, but visitors are thriving for structure, and I think we uphold that as a city. So a lot of the private lots or the parking garage don't add that value that we could add, that we do add. So I think adding a better structure such as a parking garage would increase their confidence coming to Madeira when it comes to parking in general. So a lot of getting away from the unknown of either a private lot or the parking garage or the higher rates, coming to something they're familiar with, such as a parking garage. I think that would be beneficial as well.
So I'm not saying I'm against it.
Right.
All I'm saying is that I really think before we spend money, we should have some sort of community involvement. We've just gone through the activity center where there was a lot of misinformation that got put out into the community. And I would not want to see something like that happen with this. And if we start with community involvement and then go from there, we sit in a much better space than for us to sit here and make a decision. on something that will tremendously affect our entire community.
Get back just a couple of from your comments about, is there a need, first of all, for a garage? Speaking to a lot of the businesses, yes, they believe yes. It's not, you do see cars circling, looking for spaces, typically from about second week of February all the way pretty much through Memorial Day. Even on rainy days, people still like to go out there. It is a gathering spot that you can walk without getting, completely drenched. I mean, all things, if it's just a light to moderate rain, people will still walk. You can walk under the overhang, particularly on the east side of Village Boulevard. So it's not it doesn't keep people from attending. So is there any, the other component, again, recently, there's already a parking garage in there. Why would you need a second one? And I think that's more of I'm sure that will come from residents having public meetings. Why would you need a second one? Well, a lot of it is about location, and how you advertise and how you're promoting. And I think likely the owners of the garage, they do advertise on their website. Is there an opportunity for more? Possibly. But we certainly would be encouraging and really putting this out, that, hey, you can come here and it's covered parking and you're not in the elements anymore, along the lines of what Jamal was saying. So those are a couple of things. The biggest one would be, it would add to the attraction that's already there. And how do you do that with a structure? Well, that's the creativity, the innovation, how it's designed, what it can include in it can also be part of the attraction, going back to whether it would have some sort of retail, but whether it has even a restaurant or whatever it can be, and it serve as an attraction that would add to what is not there, because the concept is to go vertical. It's tough to go horizontal without taking other things. You can, it could be a 1 or a 2 story, but then you're kind of, if you can go up a few more, you add more value to it. The other part that I did not mention when I spoke initially is the top part. If such a structure were to go here, the top part would be open air that could have future uses. One future use could be an alternative form of air transportation to and from this area. And that involves the concepts of electronic vertical takeoff and landing technology. So they're called vertiports, or having either individual or as many as 4 people, a family of 4, for example, to be transported via air through kind of what looks like a modified helicopter. I guess I'll leave it. It's still under test phasing and all other to see if it could work. Tampa International had a demo for one several months ago, but it was a single person kind of transport, modified helicopter, I'll call it. So that's a possibility, into the future, and there could be grants and capital dollars available with the companies that are currently producing that technology and that opportunity. But aside from that, I think it's a great to have a couple of public meetings and just get some input as to yes or no, or this is a terrible idea, and I think it's an okay idea. Need a lot more information. How could this work? What would it look like? What's the purpose? Who would retain ownership? It's a lot of details, but it would go a long way to just get some input, and we'll schedule to have a couple of those.
So would it be reasonable to schedule a couple of meetings and get some community input? And in the meantime, you could obtain what the cost would be for just a rendering
Yes.
based off of the feedback we get in the meetings. And then we could vote for whatever that cost is and have community involvement so that the community is a part of what's going on.
Sure. Yep. Good. Thank you.
Any more comments? Then our next item is the PC.
You can open up for public if
We-
yeah.
We can have yes, ma'am.
Yeah, come on up.
We have it.
Yeah, that's good.
What information do you need from me, first of all? I've never approached the,
Your name and address.
I'm sorry?
Your name and address, if you don't mind.
My name's Pat Miller. I'm a resident. I live on 129th. And I would be totally against a parking garage on John's Pass in that specific area, the map that was up there. Because it would really take away, and I think that a lot of the other residents are gonna agree with me. I think you're gonna get a lot, I'm surprised that there aren't more residents here, actually. I've been a Realtor for getting close to 40 years. So I'm real familiar with the area. I love the area the way it is without a parking garage. I know that we do need parking because a lot of people come down 129. Some people park illegally on, they've tried to get on my property because I've got a fairly large area, parking surface. But, I really think by putting in a garage like that, whether, even if it's just 1 story, 2 story, and I know it's gonna be more than that. Because, why bother if it's not gonna be more than that? As far as across the street goes, I think it'd be beneficial for the city, money-wise, but I don't think that's a good place either. I'm suggesting the area, and I don't know what's going on, because I was kind of out of touch for a while, and, the area where the Winn-Dixie store is and Rock Park. When that project first was being developed, they had a lot of ideas and they were gonna do a lot of things, but the city's not really making a whole lot of revenue from Rock Park. Boat shows, fishing tournaments. There's a couple concerts that I've even attended. It's very nice. They did a pretty job, but it's really not doing what I think it should be doing for the city. I love having the property. I love Madeira Beach. I've been coming here for years. I don't think a parking garage in that area is gonna do anything. I was hoping it would have maybe more restaurants or more, things to do for residents and tourists, because I know we get a lot of them. And I thought, well, what's going on with Winn-Dixie in that huge parking lot? There's a couple few stores there that now the Dollar Tree, and I don't know what the other one is on the other end now. They've changed 2 or 3 times. But, why not consider something like that? You just walk a block and you can catch the trolley and go straight down to John's Pass. So, that's not, an issue that I think would be so bad to, I think the people would generally enjoy taking a ride and seeing the community, especially if it's their first time to the area and getting familiar with what's around and getting on the trolley and riding over there, and then they come back, and the same thing, it's very inexpensive and it won't affect anything with John's Pass. A lot of people like going across the street just to watch the sunset, or, even that parking lot gets full just to watch the sunset. So I think the residents' input is really important for something like this, a project like this. I don't know if what I'm suggesting is something that would even happen. Is anyone on the board familiar with what's going on there at Winn-Dixie and the project? I know it's been going on for many, many years. I know also that there's a hotel now that they've been in negotiation in John's Pass, closer to the boardwalk there in that parking lot that's there. I don't know if they've signed on a dotted line yet or not, but, that's gonna be a lot of traffic there from a hotel. I think that's a wonderful idea to have a hotel, but I believe their only choice is gonna be to have parking underneath, and that's probably gonna be restricted to the people that are staying in the hotel, of course. But I really think that's gonna add, on top of everything else that we're discussing. So, I'm just wanted to put my 2 cents in as a resident. I think it's real important that the residents have an opportunity. They just need to know more about the meetings. I don't think they're advertised enough. I think you would have better attendance, if they knew more about them. And, I know about it because I'm a realtor, I guess. I'm always kind of looking out to see, well, what's happening here, what's going on here, and oh, you stay away for a while and you're like, wow, when did that happen? And then there's always different, all kinds of issues, People love coming to this area. It's like paradise to them. And I think that by putting a parking lot, that it would really ruin everything that Johns Pass Village has going for it,
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, if I may add just one, because she prompted me, the concept of parking garages obviously revolve around, obviously people driving their car, parking it, going to a destination. We have heard from residents, and not to compare us to other nearby locations, but over time, there have been movements to try to reduce the number of cars visiting or driving out, particularly to a barrier island. We have two types of visitors. I mean, for all things equal, we have day visitors or day trippers. They come out here hence for the day, whether to go to the sand, whether to come to a park for an event, or to go to the Johns Pass Village and Boardwalk, but for the day. The data that Visit St. Pete Clearwater produces gives us an insight into the visitors that come here. And last year, they estimated about 3.5 million visitors came to Madeira Beach. More than 2/3 are day trippers that came here for the day. Nearly 80% of those drove a personal vehicle out here. So we know that, and that's been the case for many, many years. There are, the more, from a few residents that I spoke with and visitors, well, maybe you want to look at having fewer vehicles and then you wouldn't have a need for a parking garage. Well, that's quite the challenge, how to tell somebody who lives in Tampa or even Seminole or Largo, try a different form of transportation to get out here. The reality in that is that's likely not going to happen, so we will always have. But just wanted to add that because that has been part of the conversation as well. Well, do you really want the same number or even more vehicles coming out here? That's a great question. And can we control that? What can we do for that? Well, one thing that has happened in other cities, and not just here, is when you do go through the normal redevelopment of overnight accommodations, you tend to have a different type of visitor, overnight visitor, so longer nights and days, those that do not bring a vehicle with them. But that's it's just part of the conversation, but something that we're also taking into account. We may never get to that point. One, because we don't have resorts, and we have had 2 new hotels in the last decade, I think, or well, I guess we could, if Madeira Bay and the others are considered hotels, but pretty much the Cambria and the Courtyard, and Johns Pass Hotel, though I think there are 20 or so rooms, but some things where people will no longer need a vehicle. But again, 2 different visitors that we receive. And yes, we do get a lot of overnight, but the majority of our overnight guests are staying in the condos or other properties. They tend to be driving from the majority from the Southeast, followed by the Midwest, but they tend to bring their vehicle. So just to add, because you start to get and look at as much data as out there, it kind of just takes you around in a loop as to it's tough to determine who you want. Can you control who comes here and how they get here? That's really my long answer to that, or long comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Yes.
Yeah.
Mark Callahan, 513 129th Avenue. We do live on the neighborhood behind Johns Pass, so we're familiar with coming down that street, and we just want the city to look, and my wife may not agree with me, she probably doesn't, but I'm for more parking. I think parking's a big issue on the beach, especially in Johns Pass. It's, I think, the biggest tourist attraction in the county, and we don't have the parking to even allow our own residents to come from down the street to come to Johns Pass Village. If you live in another neighborhood in Madeira Beach, there's nowhere to park. We have cars stopped on every street you can imagine around there on the way into my house. And everybody realizes that you come back down this back road, people are pulling out in front of you, they're parking in the street. I mean, they're trying to find parking, there's no parking. So, I think the idea of the city providing the parking and not gouging everybody and providing, a way for residents, thinking about the future. What is this neighborhood behind Johns Pass gonna look like? What's Johns Pass gonna look like? Because people are gonna keep coming. I mean, unless progress is gonna happen, and if we don't have the parking for it, it's just gonna make more problems for the residents. The businesses aren't gonna survive. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.
Comment?
Yep.
Just one more comment. I personally have had to park up at 134th when trying to visit Johns Pass Village. So not having enough parking, and that's a given. So the city has 3 properties in the area. They have the area that's highlighted. They have the area across the street, and they have South Beach. So there are 3 options the way I look at it, so.
May I
Thank you.
also just give a quick input real quick? The city of Treasure Island, just to the south of the bridge, just past the parking, they approved the parking lot on the water side of the Gulf Boulevard, just south of the bridge. So I think they may have about 150 parking spaces.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. PCSO Law Enforcement Services Contract Fiscal Year 2025. Robin?
Yes, I provided to all of you, we received our renewal for next year, beginning October 1 of 2024. The next renewal of our law enforcement services agreement with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office provides they are our police force here in the city of Madeira Beach. So they provide all of the patrol services, including all the, the supervision, everything related to just your basic public safety. That includes all equipment, the deputies, as the memorandum and the agenda items lists. So we received 2 deputies every minute of every day throughout the year. We also received 2 one community policing and 1 code enforcement deputy. Those are assigned to us in addition to the patrol, to do the code enforcement, to do anything, just community relations, interacting with residents, businesses, visitors, providing public safety education, also just being the someone on the ground and having 2 deputies and their presence here essentially 6 days a week. One is currently working Monday through Thursday, the other one Wednesday to Saturday. And I'll get to a proposed change in a moment. The agreement also provides for school crossing guards while school is in session. And then and the crossing guards are primarily on the Tom Stewart Causeway and Dumais Road for the Madeira Beach Monumental. We do pay half of the cost of the school crossing guards. And then all other law enforcement that we may need, up to what is listed there, but even more services such as a K-9, obviously detectives to investigate any crimes. But if we ever had a SWAT call out, certainly the helicopter that's used for searches and other investigations, the Marine unit, they also do have a mobile command, very large bus. They have a whole drone, and all the other specialized units that the sheriff's office provides that is included in this agreement. We do pay over 12, we make 12 equal monthly payments for the agreement. This agreement, as in prior years, really there's no significant change and no changes in the services that I mentioned, the change comes in the costs to us. And there have been annual increases. The increase in this proposed contract is a little bit less than the increase from the prior year to the current year, but still a little bit over 7%, mainly related to labor and equipment costs. Mileage have increased as well. So as costs increase, those are passed on to us. As I stated just a moment ago, back to our code enforcement and community policing deputies, we can request changes to those duties or specific trouble areas or specific needs that we may have. And so one of the areas that I suggest, and I did mention to the sheriff's captain that oversees the agreement, that we look to alter, and we need to work out specific details, but one of those two deputies, that they be assigned primarily on the sand, and partially the village and the boardwalk. More so on the actual beach, or 2 miles or a little over 2 miles of sand, to kind of a little bit more on the enforcement of our variety of city codes, but from not having glass, the dogs on the sand, electric usage of mainly bicycles or other electric devices, no, grills, the smoking. So really to focus on that and really be almost like a patrol assigned to those two main, and the beach, the sand, and the parking lots, and then supplement at Johns Pass Village and Boardwalk, probably more on the boardwalk. So a little bit going back to some of you may not, of the old beat cop of the prior, I still hate that term, but the walkable cop that was very visible in your high urban areas. That's about the one thing that I have not seen in the time that I've been here, is a deputy. Well, they do get out and they do walk, but in this case, we would request one be assigned. And of course, it would vary throughout the year, given the peak times and busier times. The busiest times from February through 4th of July are really the busiest time of the year, or the in season. So we would work out the details and the scheduling, but really to provide some more teeth into enforcing the codes, mainly on the sand, and more visibility, being able to help out with any other incident that may be in the sand. And although we did not, have not discussed it during the budget workshops in great detail, but we've had a few public meetings, that role, should we change it, would be kind of a complementary, should we choose to add a lifeguard program. But again, a little bit down the road on that. But that's kind of what, in looking over the last 2 years, what could be an enhancement for our safety. Definitely hear from mainly residents and property owners about some of the issues on the sand, between the dogs and the smoking and the e-bikes and other usage. So we would assign them not their entire 40 hours a week, but certainly we would look at what that schedule would look like, and to cover weekends throughout the year. Obviously, weekends are busier than weekdays, even in the summer. So I'm going to meet with the captain next week to kind of go over some of what could be done and how that would work. But this is a draft agreement. I think we would, probably a little bit of the wording would change when we bring it back to you for your approval, which would either be probably not at the next regular meeting in August, but the meeting in September for approval, because the new agreement does begin October 1. So be happy to answer any questions you may, comments.
Do we have any public comment? Commissioners?
I think that's a great idea as far as the community policing and the code enforcement, and use them on the sand side, the beach side. Also, I know you're getting with the captain next week. The only question I would have is, I would like to see more of a, say, 11 to 7 type shift. I don't know if we can do that or not. with those two, like the community policing,
11 PM to 7?
11 AM to 7
Oh,
PM,
okay.
something like that, when we get more of a higher volume of people heading to the beach. But I think that's a great idea. That will help educate the people as far as no glass, no smoking, no dogs. And as a community officer, they're gonna come off, we want to be as nice and as we can be, so I think that's a great idea, just to educate everyone, especially around those hours. Thanks.
I'm certainly in favor of the cops on the sand. You said there's no increase, and you're just talking about redefining their duties, not,
Yes,
not, no.
yeah, it would
change. So
not be an
it doesn't
additional
change
position.
what
no.
we're paying them.
Yeah.
The dogs, the e-bikes, the glass, and I would suggest, definitely weekends, but every day, an hour before sunset. I'm very much in favor of a stronger police presence on the sand. I hate to think that Madeira Beach would be getting the reputation of anything goes.
So this officer would be walking along the beach, let's say from Archibald Park to Johns Pass area?
Well, they would likely be using one of the Polaris, their all-terrain type four-wheel
I see.
vehicle. But I mean, I would encourage them to obviously get out and walk and chat with people. And you can't, sometimes the Polaris can't go everywhere, particularly if it's super, super busy and the water, the moon has pushed the water up onto the dunes almost. So during the tides, but yeah, that would be the idea, is to have them be a lot more visible and a lot more walking and talking, speaking and interacting with mainly visitors that are out on the sand, but certainly some residents.
So you wouldn't have a station for this person, right? In other words, just walk on the beach and,
Yeah, again, they would likely either drive, and they could also use their vehicle. I mean, they're all assigned a vehicle, but that could be part of it. But the idea is to have them on the Polaris more than any other, but also periodically get out and walk. So their main station, regardless of where they are in the city, is here. And this is kind of where they, if they need to use any facility, they come back here. We are gonna have, new bathrooms at Archibald Park, but, so they'll be able to use that, but we are retrofitting downstairs. That's gonna be a room, little larger space for all of the deputies, not just our community policing, but that's the idea, is just to be much more visible, but specifically most of the time on the sand and in the parking lot.
I know it gets very hot out there, especially in uniform.
Sure. We'll get him one that has the air condition like the mascot.
Just for clarity, the patrol, they're pretty much in their vehicles all the time.
Yes. Well, they'll patrol in the Polaris also. That whenever you typically see a deputy on the sand and they're not in a vehicle, usually before sunset or after, or when it gets very crowded, those are some of the patrol deputies.
Okay, you're not looking to, this agreement, what you have outlined here is no different than what we
It's the
had
same.
last year.
Yes.
As far as manpower, it's just how we're using them.
Correct.
No, so as far as budgets are concerned, it's
It's the same, yeah.
the same, and I fully support what you use your men the way you see fit.
I agree. I think having a police officer on the beach more would be fantastic. A lot of the complaints that we receive from residents, whether it's a dog or smoking or loud music or groups of kids or what have you, by the time the police get there, it's gone. So I think having the presence would set a precedent and a tone for the beach. And that might eliminate a lot of that, which I would believe would make a lot of residents very happy. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Now we will move on to community development, proposed zoning change for 129th Avenue East.
All right. The city was contacted by a property owner, along with some other supporting neighbors, requesting to allow short-term rentals for properties along 129th Avenue East. And I'll pull it up on the map, so we're all talking about the same area. Type in 63. All right, let me zoom out. It'll be this area right here, close to Johns Pass Village. It's zoned R2 and has a residential medium future land use category. So currently in R2 zoning district, it prohibits allowing short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are prohibited, and a short-term rental is any rental less than 3-month period. So to allow a short-term rental along this area, a new zoning district would need to be created, and then those areas would have to be rezoned to that new zoning district. And if you amended anything in the R2 zoning district, that could jeopardize the whole short-term rental or grandfathering in of that 3-month period. So this is just something that was brought to our attention, to city staff, and there were some supporting neighbors in that area. So this is just a discussion if the board would like to go forward. And we may see an application from the property owners of that area to create a new zoning district and then rezone.
Do we have any public comment?
Dawn Callahan, 513 129th Avenue, and I live on site, and we have a duplex. And I do believe, based on our street, it's not a normal neighborhood. Most of the homes, if not all of them, have a minimum of a mother-in-law suite. Also, we are behind Johns Pass. In reference to where we are, you can see where that proposed parking garage is being proposed earlier. I think that based on where we live as an owner, I should have the right to determine whether I want to do a short-term rental or not. Whether I do or not, I'm not really sure if it was to pass, but I think I should have that right. And again, we're not a normal neighborhood by no stretch of the imagination. And based on where we live and also too having other two homeowners that already can do it, that it just makes sense that we should have that right. Thank you.
Mayor, can I ask a question of this speaker? I'm sorry. So just to be clear, you are in favor of
Yes.
short-term rentals? Okay.
Yes, but not the 4-story parking garage. I'm against that. But yes, I'm for short-term rental on that street on
Thank you.
129th and an owner of the house. So I do live on site full-time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Robert Showalter. I own a property located at 500 129th Ave East. I owned the property for about 3 years. As a general contractor, I took the project on to redevelop the property and try to increase the value, obviously, to potentially have the opportunity to increase the revenue. That brought me to the discussion with the city several months ago, over last year, and then a little more recently, to be able to petition to have the city consider rezoning the neighborhood, given its unique features that we all access through the busiest tourist attraction in Pinellas County. We would like to consider the city changing the zoning to allow for a short-term rental. Currently, we have a 90-day minimum, which really shuts out quite a few of the families, including mine, as a child, to be able to have the opportunity to stay down at the beach. I don't know very many families of my income as a child that would have the opportunity to experience staying down at the beach with a minimum of 90 days. Over the last several months, I petitioned some of our neighbors with the opportunity to sign a written pledge. We were able to secure what I believe to be a supermajority of the 42 property owners in the neighborhood, given again the unique consideration of our access for ingress egress, which is different than any other neighborhood in the city, as well as the density for the community. We have a lot of high density, greater than 6-unit properties in the city where it's not very common for that to be a higher density in other neighborhoods. So if the question were to arise, what would stop other neighborhoods from making the same petition? Well, ingress egress with some language with whereas on the zoning may prohibit that from being something that would be widespread petitions to mirror what we're doing here. I spent a couple weekends with the commissioners, met several of the commissioners discussing the Johns Pass Village zoning and public feedback. What I noticed was the overarching theme from either developers, property owners, and or the city was that we wanted to do everything we could to protect and promote foot traffic. And I feel very confident that this is in line with what the city's desire, along with the developers and property owners, to continue to protect the foot traffic for Johns Pass. It is a destination location that's known throughout this, United States. It's a very high trafficked tourist location, and I think the short-term rental use would be in line with something that is similar to what the city is pursuing with the village. We have a neighborhood that is adjoining us, which is over on Pelican, and they are currently short-term rental allowed. It's I think the R2 zoning, and we're just trying to bring our neighborhood, which has sole ingress egress through the Johns Pass Activity Center, in line with that adjoining neighborhood. I thank you.
Pat Miller, again, I'm also on 129th. I'm in favor of short-term. I understand that there's a lot of people that are against it because I've seen in the paper, several articles, some of the kids, like when they come, the college kids come over, they like to party, they make a lot of noise. As a resident, as an owner, I have a duplex there. I stay in one and I rent the other side out. A lot of times, because I've owned the property for several years, I lean towards an annual, but I think people have the right to decide which way they want to go with this. I think it should be open and allow people to do that. There are occasions where, if I do happen to have a vacancy and there's an event coming that, people like to stay. Well, they can't stay for 3 months because maybe they can't afford it or what have you. They like to stay for 1 month. I don't really like the idea of anybody, 2 or 3 day occupancy, because I think that would be just way too much. But because of where we're located, because of the activities, everything that's going on there, I think it would be more beneficial, like on Pelican Lane, they do allow the short term. I don't understand why we're limited to the 90-day minimum. I think it should be changed and allow the residents and the owners to be able to rent to, whichever way they want to go. I happen to do a lot of background check. I do criminal background check. I do credit check, so I'm very careful with who I rent to. And I'm just suggest, for the people that don't like the idea of short-term rental, that they should do background checks before they decide to take on a tenant, because I think that would really help matters in their situation, if they're concerned about that. That's probably why I've never had a problem with that. So I'm all for the short-term rental.
Do we have any additional public comment?
I would like to talk in support as well of short-term rentals on 129th behind Johns Pass. If you look at the way that particular neighborhood is positioned, it is an extension of Johns Pass, in my opinion. And again, we probably wouldn't do short-term rentals just because I don't want to deal with it. We live there. I think we should have the right to do short-term rentals because we are basically an apartment building that we live on site. Okay, we're monitoring the noise, the crime, whatever. I think most of the neighbors live on site. Our neighbors are always changing. We live in an apartment neighborhood. It's apartments. And I have new neighbors every week. And a lot of the ones that are staying there are not to the level of the ones that are coming in for 2 or 3 days and willing to pay for short-term rental. So I think for us in this neighborhood, I think that the parties and stuff like that, I think would be kept to a minimum. I know that's a concern for some of the other neighborhoods. And for a single family neighborhood, I certainly understand not wanting to have short-term rentals, but this neighborhood certainly is unique, and I think that the city needs to look at what the future of Johns Pass is going to be, and 129th and the homeowners there should be a part of that. Thank you.
Robert Showalter, 500 129th Ave. I have several property owners that were not able to be here today, and I'd like to enter in some of the comments and support that they provide to us, as well as the petitions that we've had signed to date, including Ms. Miller's would be 28 of the 42 property owners that are in support of short-term rentals. Mayor, where do I present these?
Please. Commissioners?
Can I ask that, is this going to include that little loop on the other end, like the Snake's Head on the other end of Pelican Lane? Or is it just for this on the right-hand side?
No, they've just talked about this on the right-hand side.
Okay, all right.
Just 129th Avenue.
Yes.
East.
And I think you said this, we would be able to define it so that it wouldn't include other, what is this currently, R3?
This is R2.
Oh, R2, it's currently
zoning.
R2. It wouldn't, it wouldn't impact other R2s.
So what would have to happen is a creation of a new zoning district. And then within that zoning district, you could do short-term rentals. Because if we change the R2 zoning district, we just amend the text to allow short-term rentals just on 129th, that could jeopardize all of R2's grandfathered in rental period. So it'd
Thank
have
you.
to be a new zoning district.
Got it. I just want to say, in addition to the, obviously, 28 people, plus one that Mr. Showalter's provided, I have a couple of friends that are at the gym with me, and I've spoken to them. They live there full-time, and they're in favor. So I haven't heard anyone opposed to it. So I'd be in favor of it.
Do we know how many properties there are homestead?
I don't know, but it looks like we might have somebody that knows that.
Yeah.
Robert Showalter, 500 129th. I believe there was about 13 to 14 properties that were homesteaded. However, off the record, there may be a few that are homesteaded that aren't actually homesteaded. So that number is actually 12, but that's a county issue, not a city issue. Of the 12 properties that are homesteaded, many, if not the majority, have voiced no opposition to this. Several are owner occupied along with rental income. There are a few single-family homes at the end of the cul-de-sac that have voiced that they do not want short-term rentals. I made an effort to do some grassroots door knocking, just to introduce myself, ask what the concerns were, address in a respectful manner that I wanted to hear their voice and not do something to their neighborhood that they didn't want to do, but wanted to give them the opportunity to discuss it. And so there's a few at the end of the cul-de-sac that really don't like the traffic. The cul-de-sac is not the typical 140-foot diameter cul-de-sac, which allows for people to turn around. And so people come down our road quite a bit, and they were concerned about potential increased traffic. Off the record, there's a lot of people that short-term rent back there until there was a task force by a previous commissioner that I think Ms. Weissman had asked that they had stopped a lot of the short-term rentals while she lived back there. She moved on, and the short-term rentals began to proliferate our neighborhood. But many of the property owners that I've spoken to back there don't oppose the traffic. They like the short-term rentals because it's less, although it's transient by a week, it's just not the lower income rentals that occupy some of those dwellings that haven't been renovated a lot over the years. So they're a little run down here and there. So it brings a lot more development and dollars into the neighborhood like myself has brought.
Thank you. So public comment is closed. This time is reserved for the commission to be able to have discussions. When we have a presentation, the presentation is given by city staff, and then we open for public comment. The purpose of public comment at the beginning is so that the commission can discuss what has been brought to us, not only by city staff, but also by anyone that is in attendance that comes up and gives public comment. And then we get to have the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves based off of all of the information we've received. Commissioners, do you have any additional comments?
Thank you, Mayor. If I might finish.
Go ahead.
first.
I'm sorry.
It's still recognized, I think. The reason I asked that is who's looking out for, I know if I was Homestead, I would have an issue. I heard from a resident not on that street, not in that area, as early as today, or as recent as today, where a home is doing short-term rentals next to them, and it is may turn their world upside down. Do we want to be a residential community that has tourism? Or do we want to be a tourist community that has residents? When this was first introduced, I heard about it months ago. I asked around some people that live close by, not on 129. And they weren't too negative about it. So I was on the fence about it. But did you mention that this could jeopardize our status with what the state had done? It didn't pass this time, but it was close. The governor rejected it.
It would be only if we amended the R2 zoning. So we would have to create a new zoning district just for that area.
Okay, so that would not impact any of that then.
No, R2 would stay the same. That area would just have to be rezoned something new.
Okay, thank you.
A private-led effort or a city?
As far as the rezoning, for 129th in that area, I wouldn't have a problem with it right now. If this is just a discussion, we're not going to vote on anything tonight. But for now, I would like to hear more of the community come out and speak, and let me hear what they have to say. And then we can go from there. But at the current time, my stance is I don't have a problem with it. Thanks.
I don't think we should initiate rezoning. I think the residents should engage a consultant to bring this before this board. I don't think the city should initiate rezoning this. A consultant would have to make sure that by changing the zoning, we're not creating a non-conformity. There will be a lot of issues that I would want to make sure that we would not take on liability for. So, and as Commissioner Kerr stated, also if some of those folks want to have homesteaded, and now they would have to, I guess their taxes will be increased. So that's going to be an issue. And so I do see some concerns. I mean, I have some concerns in here. And I don't think the city should initiate that rezoning.
And I just wanted to point out, there is an avenue for a resident or somebody else to put an application to amend the LDR, so to create a new zoning district. And then it would come from the applicant to rezone a property as well. So that's what staff would be recommending.
And that would go through the planning commission before it came to us?
Would,
Yes.
well, would have to go through the planning commission regardless because
Correct.
it is a zoning or a proposed zoning change.
Yes.
Vice Mayor, do you have any?
I thought I spoke already.
You did.
I'm in favor.
My only concerns would be, one that was brought up of all of the illegal short-term rentals. That's probably an area that we should focus some time and attention on in the municipality. I actually had someone provide me with a map of the city that showed short-term rentals in the city that are illegal, and they're advertised on websites so that being brought up, that's we should be having discussion about that for
Yeah,
sure.
which is what we do in code enforcement.
Right. So, if there are illegal short-term rentals going on 129th, that should not be happening.
Correct.
And I agree that if they want to get a new zoning, it should just come through the normal channels to us. My only thought would be that if I lived on that street and I lived in a homesteaded house, I would not be happy. So if I was one of the 12 people who didn't sign a petition, I would not be happy for my entire street to change. I bought it whenever I bought it. I bought it as a house in an R2 district. I can see where that would really upset 12 homeowners, I think was the number. So I would be of the opinion that to go along with staff's recommendation and let it just go through the channels. We'd have our meetings and see how the community feels. Any more discussion?
Just to add, all those ownerships, all those property owners would have to be a part of that rezoning request. In other words, when it comes before the board, so you would know who is actually wanting to rezone and who wouldn't. So
I
if
think that-
somebody wouldn't, they would not be signing the application.
Correct.
Isn't
Well,
that what we received
We
from
did,
them?
so we
We've
received,
received that.
we
Yeah, but there will be
received,
some that don't.
Right.
There will be some that are not going to sign the application to rezone. So. Okay,
Right, but we did receive those that are supporting and want this to go forward.
Sure,
Right.
understood.
I don't think we're gonna, I mean, in other words, you're thinking we would get something from those opposed in writing from
There
them?
would, no, there would be a residents that would not support the rezoning that currently live in that district.
Well, we are aware that there are some that are not supportive of
They
it.
will not be either, I mean, you can't create a spot zoning, obviously, so we would have to kind of look at the whole picture.
Well, it's either all of it or none of it, right?
Right.
And so, but we, as was presented, we have a multitude of property owners and residents that have made this request. And we know that there are some that are not in favor of it. That's what we have. I don't know what, if I mean, are you asking for something else?
Well, no, I'm just saying the ones that are not in favor of it are not going to sign the application to move forward. So
Right.
So each property owner would have to be party to that application.
they wouldn't have to be. So the process, correct me if I'm wrong, would be that the party here today would submit for a change in zoning to create a new zoning district. It would come to community development. Community development would do all their whatevers. Then it would go to planning and zoning. Planning and zoning would either vote to move it on or vote it down. If they voted to move it on and did whatever there is, it would come to us and then we would get to vote on
Yeah,
it.
I do
And
understand
it,
the
so it
process.
could potentially, if there were 12 families there that didn't want it, if they didn't come here and voice their opinion, it could potentially pass and that whole street could get a new zoning that would allow short-term rentals. That's what they're asking for.
So we could,
Correct, am I correct in
correct.
what I'm stating?
Yes.
so we could pass a zoning without the.
Yes,
Some residents wanting to rezone their properties.
we could. I'm not saying we would, but we could.
Sure,
I don't know what
understood.
everybody would do, but that would, I mean, that would be, I have had a conversation with several residents who know of this, that live in different areas of the city that are in R2 zoning districts. And of course, they live in a residential area. It's where they chose to move into a residential area that doesn't have short-term rentals, that hasn't had it. They are 100% against us changing any residential neighborhood to allow short-term for the fear that if we did that, their neighborhood could be next. I understand the argument here, it's the one way in, one way out, ingress egress, and that makes it a unique situation to change it. And I don't know where I really stand on it, other than I think that, again, it's something that you need additional community input. You need to understand how the other 12 people who didn't sign on feel about it and how the planning commission feels about it, how it would come through community development and be presented.
So the rezoning, whatever that zoning is, should also then allow for residents to be homesteaded.
It wouldn't change homestead.
Yeah, it's not.
Homestead's homestead.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
it
state
won't change their
statute.
homestead.
Just the ones that will be, short-term rentals, their homestead
Would
their
go away.
homestead will change.
Correct.
I see.
Yeah, it wouldn't affect if the,
Well, unless you live on the property. You can
well,
live in your property and rent out your property
and
and
only
you still
homes-
retain the homestead
well, you homestead at a percentage.
or a
then.
percentage.
You could homestead at 50% or 25% or 60, whatever the percentage is that the property appraiser's office determines you're allowed.
Thank you.
That was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
With nothing else from the commission, we will move on to floodplain amendments.
All right, so we were approached recently to update our floodplain sections in the code. So this would be 3 different areas in the Code of Ordinances. It would be section 82.2, which is our definitions, chapter 14, which is technical codes and standards, and then chapter 94, floodplain management. So when we update anything floodplain related, we have to check with the state, with FDEM, and they work with FEMA. So that's actually who contacted us to update our standards. So section 82.2, the definitions section, which starts on page 66 of the packet. You can see everything that would be changing is highlighted in yellow. Basically, it's bringing all of the definitions together in one section. So there is a section in chapter 94 that has definitions. We would be moving all of that into section 82.2, which is the definition section for the entire Code of Ordinances. And then moving to chapter 14, and that starts on page 96 of your packet. This just reiterates that the city follows the current Florida Building Code. And then this chapter includes the areas where the city has higher standards than the Florida Building Code. And then there's another section in there. It's on starts on page 98 that city staff would be suggesting to put in the code would be the sediment fencing section. That's on page 99 of your packet. And then another change would be in section 14-39 would be updated with a new format. And you can see that on page 108. I know this is a lot of changes. This will definitely come back before you for a workshop. This is just the initial draft. So we'll still be working on this. We'll also bring this to Planning Commission as well. So it'll look a little different. But these are the initial comments from FDEM and FEMA to us to get us up to current standards. And then going to chapter 94, like you stated before, the biggest changes would be removing the definitions, putting that in section 82.2, and just to assure consistency throughout the code. Another addition would be the limitations on fill, so that there could not be more than 24 inches of non-structural fill for drainage. So those are the main changes. You'll see this again. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of different sections in the code, moving things around, but we just wanted to put this out in front of everybody to start looking at it, start thinking about it. This will come probably August or September for another workshop. But this is just the initial draft.
And just to be clear, what initiates this is the release of the new Florida Building Code. So once the new Florida Building Code comes out, we have to incorporate the new release, address any of the technical amendments. And this is also our opportunity to tackle some of the stuff in the floodplain that ordinances that we've been wanting to address as well. So that's kind of what initiates it. And then from there, we're kind of trying to make some other changes and kind of clean it up a little bit.
Do we have any public comment? Having no public comment, commission?
Marcy answered one of the questions I had. That's good. The second, I don't know if, I assume that these ordinances will impact residents and commercial properties the same?
Yeah, so it'll be just whatever, it'll be the same.
Okay.
And there shouldn't be any large changes that are necessarily impactful. It's more or less like reorganizing the definitions, where stuff is located, how it's worded, adding a little more teeth, like she said, to silt fencing, clarifying our fill requirements and where fill can be utilized, and that'll be in line with every other municipality, or well, no, I shouldn't say that. It'll be in line with Florida Building Code and
Right.
FEMA.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, continue to work with FDEM on updating the city's floor plan, in my opinion.
Comments?
Of course, we have comments. I refer you to page 100, please. Section 14-39-6, which you did not have changed, but I have an issue with. Structural fill shall not be used to elevate buildings. I think we spoke about this in a previous meeting. I'd like that to be a discussion point at minimum, because if we don't elevate our buildings, we can't elevate our roads. If we can't elevate our roads, we continue to have sunny day flooding, and it just builds on itself. So we need to be able to elevate our buildings. And if that's in conflict with FEMA, then I think we need to have more discussions with FEMA.
So we can definitely, I'd like to put something together that's a little more cohesive for the next kind of discussion coming up. But there are rules around the fill, as City of Treasure Island is discussing too, like you can't add structural fill in velocity zones and stuff like that. And so it's more or less around the difference between structural fill and non-structural fill, defining that and stating where it can be used. But when it comes to the FEMA requirements, we would be hard pressed to deviate from that. And that's kind of falls in line with also what Treasure Island discussed as well, as they have areas where you will not be getting more than 2 feet of fill to elevate your property because it's in a velocity zone or a coastal A.
Okay, well, here it says structural fill shall not be used to elevate buildings. It doesn't say 2 foot of fill. It says structural fill shall not be used.
And we allow fill for drainage reasons. So I'm trying to find
But that's-
where in the code
But that's
that
not
it
the
has it right
building.
now, but also elevated buildings have to be on pilings. That's in here. I don't have it tabbed, but that's in, I believe it's either 14 or 94.
Right, but again, with the Treasure Island, they have a goal of no more than 2 foot of what it is existing. I think their goal was 7.2 feet or 7.6 feet or.
Right, they've set the 5-foot seawall and like 7-foot finished floor, if I remember correctly. Again, it comes down to structural fill versus non-structural fill. Because we require pilings, all of our buildings are supported on deep foundations. So
Okay, so-
technically, they're not depending on fill to be
Okay,
structurally
so-
supported.
So you're not, the definition then, I'm having an issue with the definition. Structural fill is not underneath a slab. So as long as you're connected to the pilings and the pilings are driven, whatever they need to be driven, your, what do they call it? The base floor elevation, you can use fill to increase your base flood elevation to whatever's approvable.
And the idea would be like, during a flood event, you can have fill that's designed to stay in place during a flood event or to go away during a flood event. If the fill goes away during the flood event, the structure is not impacted because it's not structurally supporting the building because the pilings are. So that fill can technically be lost and not lose any structural integrity to the building. And since we require deep foundations, that is what the situation we are in as a municipality. So like I said, I would like to prepare something better that's a little more clear for everybody. This is just kind of like a first blush to get everything out there.
Okay, so you are concerned about the fill underneath the slab washing away? Because the slab's not structural.
Correct. The slab, well, so slabs can be frangible in coastal A and velocity zones, so they can be designed to break away during a flood event, as would the fill wash away. It gets a little more tricky. Historically, we do not allow structural fill. So if we wanted to start doing that, that's something we have to discuss, because like I said, in the coastal A zones and V zones, it won't be allowed. But we do have other areas in the city where we can discuss it. But it's still not supporting the building. And I think that's what I just want to be clear about. It's not providing support for the building. So it's FEMA's definition of structural fill versus an engineer using structural fill to achieve structural support. Sense.
Okay, well, it's not,
I know what you. I know
we're
what
going
you
around
mean.
and around. I don't want to.
I know, yeah, that's why I said I
but-
don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole.
All right,
I intend to provide better clarity, though.
there's a couple other things, bear with me. Had it highlighted on the following page, but same thing. What is, non-conversion?
The non-conversion agreement,
Yeah,
that is something that new homeowners with elevated buildings are required to sign, just so they won't convert their ground floor into livable space.
and are you requesting that you have inspection rights to their home? Because I think that's been litigated, hasn't it?
It includes that. There are higher standards that we could get extra points with the community rating system, the CRS program. But we're not proposing changes on that. So currently, we have that non-conversion agreement.
So if someone builds a new home, they pretty much have to give you access to inspect it at any time.
Yes. I can't remember exactly how the non-conversion agreement is written, but it is one of the required documents.
I recall a conversation years ago with someone building a new home, and they said that they had the resources to litigate that, and they were gonna do it for everyone else. I don't know if it ever was litigated and came back to the city. I've asked Robin about it. He wasn't aware of anything, but I didn't know. So I guess that was never litigated.
Tom, can you speak to that? I know we had one particular case where it was challenged.
So I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll definitely ask the litigating partners in the firm if they handled something like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
I think they were my big takeaways.
Any further comments?
Just real quick, first of all, any questions I have, I'll be sending them to you guys, if I don't know the answer. The construction fencing, now, it says that construction without fencing is prohibited. So is that on the west side of Gulf Boulevard and the east side of Gulf Boulevard? And then it says the temporary fencing shall be required during all phases of construction until the city manager or the representative permits removal of the temporary fence. Just my question is, all of the I'm talking about residential construction as far as people elevating their house, say, or tearing down their house and then rebuilding. Is a temporary fence mandatory for residents that are elevating their house or tearing down their house? Or is it that just for commercial companies?
Typically, that type of fencing would only be associated with commercial properties, so we can work to better define that in here.
So like if a resident is adding on a bathroom or something like that, any type, because it says any type of construction.
And
I'm just, do they have to have fencing around their property to do that construction?
just the silt fencing if they're making like land alterations, but the full-size construction fencing would not be a requirement for that type of construction.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm checking.
And those are things we can obviously clarify better.
Thank you.
Have any comments?
Well, this FEMA requirements can be somewhat complicated. I think the city of Treasure Island may be removing, Marcy, would you check with the city of Treasure Island? I think they're removing their requirements for the structural fill. I've heard that basically they did not want to have any net gain of fill or dirt when you develop a property. But to Commissioner Kerr's concern, we're trying to keep the floor elevations above flood. If you get a pretty bad rain and you have a foot of water standing in the street, you don't want to have the elevation of the floor to be low because you'd be flooding them. And you can't flood-proof residential, and it just doesn't work. So I am definitely in favor of not having that structural fill requirements as a part of this, and I don't think it's a FEMA requirement. FEMA would not require that. So I think, as also Marcy stated, this is probably just a very first blush, and we need to take a better look at this.
Yeah, so, we can better define that, but velocity zones and coastal A zones are very clear about structural fill and the use of it. And the Florida Building Code also references it as well. So however we pick to go forward, I mean, we can definitely start, allowing more than 24 inches of fill if that's the direction we want to take, and we can discuss those and kind of go through that iteration.
Where's velocity zone in Madeira Beach? Isn't it, I don't think we.
We have more coastal A locations, like all of Bay Point's coastal A. So
Yeah, I
that's where
haven't
it starts to
seen
get a little tricky.
Yeah, some of the Finger Islands have that coastal A. Along 150th, you also have some coastal A.
But they're not velocity. I mean, we're talking about velocity zone.
A lot of them are have to be built the same way as a V zone.
Any additional comments? With no additional comments, we will move on to the Johns Pass Village Activity Center zoning.
All right, we wanted to provide you an update and then also an opportunity for any comments or concerns on the Johns Pass Village zoning. So we are planning to bring this to the next Planning Commission meeting. All these ordinances for recommendation along with the rezoning. And then you will see it as well next month. So what we have in your packets, we have all the ordinances to rezone the Johns Pass Village Activity Center area. So it encompasses ordinance 2024-09, which is creating this new appendix that has all of the design standards and criteria for that area. It talks about all the character districts. Basically, this is the document that you've seen multiple times at workshops that the Planning Commission has also seen for discussion item. And then next we have 2024-10, which is amending C1 zoning district to refer to that Appendix D that was just created. And then the next ordinance, which is 2024-11, is actually rezoning that whole area to C1. And then lastly, the 2024-12 is amending C2, which is the boardwalk, which won't be used anymore. So that would be to reserved.
Do we have any public comment?
Pat Miller, do I need to introduce myself again? Pat Miller on the 129th. I had a question, I don't really understand, if you could clarify that for me, as far as the changes that are happening to Johns Pass Village, how are they changing opposed to how they are now? What can and can they not do? Can you kind of summarize that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a, sorry, but it's not a question and answer. It's just your opportunity to comment. If you have I mean, you can, we can take your information and then get back with you on your
Oh,
questions.
That'd be fine. But does it change any of the values as far as what it has to do with the residents that are on 129th? I don't know if it does or not, but I'd like to know more about that. Who would I submit my name and number to?
If you fill out a comment
Comment
card
card.
at the back and leave it with the city clerk,
Okay, okay, sounds good, thank you.
thank you. Commissioners?
I'll start. I guess it's 2024-09. Is that where they speak about height? Anyway, I had, I had requested to actually have a drawing put in that I submitted, and Marcy did such a great job expanding on that. I just want everyone to understand when we get to the height portion of this, what we're talking about. And hopefully this diagram will be provided to the Planning Commission as well. So with this drawing here, we have a 3-story structure with basically a 14-foot first level, 2 foot between each levels, and 10 foot for the second and third stories. Since we're measuring to the eave, we're looking at, in this example, a 27.5 foot height to be able to get that elevation. I think in the documents here, we're looking at height based on footprint, which I don't remember discussing that or where that came from. If you're in a larger lot, you're in a 1 acre lot, you can build something higher than you are if you're on a half acre lot.
We discussed it at the zoning workshops earlier in the year, where what we did to avoid having bulky buildings is we required larger lot sizes to allow for more height, but then the upper floors have to be stepped back. The heights we looked at were similar to what was in the zoning code pre-1983, and also similar to what was proposed in the master plan, the LDR section that was proposed but not adopted. So, and we also looked at what was existing on the ground so.
Right, so here on page 151, commercial core lots equal to or less than a 1/4 acre are 34 feet. So that's higher than what's shown in this diagram.
Right.
To a half acre, it's 44 feet. Lots larger than a half acre, we're talking 55 feet.
Which is
So,
what the parking structure currently is down there. That's the mixed-use parking structure is
Well-
that, about that.
I think, Marcy, you took some measurements of some of the eaves when we were down there. Was that documented? I'm sure. Do you have that on some of the eaves? you had a tool, I think, that you had borrowed from,
Yes, I have notes, but I don't have them with me. But I
oh,
do have notes.
One
I do
thing,
have the notes from all of our walking tours.
one thing we'll be bringing when this goes to the planning commission for public hearing is we've been working with Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, who has made a support document that visualizes what the proposed land development regulations would look like down there in each character district. And we hope to have that document, a final version, soon, but we've been, because it's important to show what things could look like, but as we did look at what was previously built down there, so a lot of the heights are similar to that, and we looked at other activity centers in similar size and scale, like the downtown Dunedin and the Paso Grill area, that has like the, yeah, it's
I
not the
just
same.
think we need to be very careful on the zoning, just like our earlier conversation about the parking garage. If we lose the look and feel of the village, we've lost it all. We're gonna have all these new buildings and it's just gonna be, it's not gonna be an attraction anymore. It's supposed to be an attraction to bring visitors, to benefit our community. So.
So, one thing we do have in the zoning is under, section D, 113, we have design standards and guidelines, and it explains, kind of what needs to be done to make sure new buildings look similar to what's currently there.
I know, but that's abstract. If you have a 55-foot building at the eve, that means you have maybe a 60-foot building to the peak. I don't know that that's what I don't know that that's what the community wants to see personally.
I mean, there's already buildings down there that are that height.
But that's the parking garage, which is over in the corner that you can't really embrace as part of the village. If you put that parking garage in the middle of the village, it would stick out like a sore thumb.
We're not allowing that height in that part. The traditional village part doesn't allow for that height. Basically, the only districts that allow for that height already have buildings of that height. So it's the commercial core.
But that's not true. Commercial core goes all the way down to Waltz.
Okay, I actually did a map of the height limits. Let me go back to that. So we can discuss it. So the village, this is 34 to 44 feet, which is the current max height limit in commercial district, other zoning districts in Madeira Beach. And then the only places that allow up to 55 feet are the commercial core and the Johns Pass Resort, which both have structures that are around that height currently.
Yeah. But again, commercial core goes all the way up to the R2 district.
I mean, any building along the, public right, they have to step back to upper floors, so, I mean, you from the street level, you wouldn't see the top of the building. I can show it down. So for example, with this building, so this is a 6-story parking garage, but from the street, you see the 2-story, commercial on the ground and then temporary lodging units above it. So at street level, you see the 2-story part of it, but behind it is a 6th-floor parking garage, but the garage part is hidden. The goal is to kind of hide the height to make sure that you don't get bulky buildings, and that's what we've written into code. So if someone comes in, they can't get around that that's what they have to work within those limitations.
The this is going to the planning commission before we look at it.
Yes, this will go to planning commission. So you can see the step backs, what Andrew's talking about in the setback requirements. It's a D, for all of the sections, I believe, or it's the last,
Which page is that?
subsection on it. That starts, 146 of the packet. And like Andrew mentioned, we're working with Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and they've given us a draft of visuals of all the districts, with the heights, with the step backs, with the setbacks. So that will also be going before you at the next meeting. So you get to see this. I think that visual really helps see what it could look like. Especially since there's so many different things, like if you have a larger lot, the setbacks might be a little different, the height might be a little different, and then really visualizing that step back for those upper floors.
As shown here, for the front yard, for example, for buildings of two or more stories high, 10-foot setback with either a structured arcade or a covered walkway allowing setback or awning over the 10 feet setback. The second floor and above may have a structured porch within the setback. So, and then the side yard, for corner lots with a side yard along a street, the side setback along the street shall
All right,
be
but
10 feet. And then,
isn't that a grade? I mean, am I misreading this, or I don't see that it says that it steps back the further you go up. I mean, if you go
oh,
back to
yeah,
your,
it's this
go back
one.
to your Google map there for a second.
So, for multiple story buildings, a 10-foot minimum step back behind the primary facade of the building shall be required for stories above the second floor for portions of a building facing or bordering a public right of way. So it's D. I can go back to that. And I'm gonna just move back a little bit.
Right. Now, if you look down Boardwalk and you see how much higher that looks back there, how would you do that anywhere else in the village? I mean, if you just took a few steps down Boardwalk, you'd see, I think everyone embraces what you see on the other street. What is that?
I think this turquoise
What?
building is a good example of kind of like what the step back would look like. You see like the second floor, doesn't protrude out as far as the first floor. So that's what the step back would be like.
Right, but that eave, I would assume that eave is similar to what the drawing is here.
It's probably a little bit taller than.
And we're talking double this because this drawing is a 27.5-foot eave. We're talking double that. You don't see that parking garage from anywhere in the village unless you're right up on it.
And because the upper floors are stepped back like what we're proposing in the zoning.
Okay, I'm done.
Any comments?
Yes. I think we just touched on this conversationally earlier with regard specifically to the transitional zone, right? I would love to see some wording, and if it's here, forgive me, I've scrolled through, I don't see it, regarding no rooftop bars, no amplified music, and a new one that I'd like to add is no beach party permits. So just to be clear, a lot of people actually do live on the west side on the beach. There are homes there. There's only one business. I think it's TRS Realty. Other than that, it's all residential. So we've had some issues with amplified sound for special events. We've had a couple of parties that got permits, but it was pretty disruptive to the neighbors that live right behind. So just for the transitional zone change, I'd like to see no rooftop bars, no amplified music, and no party permits on the sand. Wanted to just enter that into discussion. Unless it's already there and I just don't see it.
Right now, it's written in as a special exception use. So special exceptions would have to go to the special magistrate for the transitional, for all of the districts, for an open rooftop or terrace uses. But that is something that we could remove as not an allowed use.
Yeah, I'd love
The
to see that.
only question I would probably have for Tom, is I know that we do have at least one building that already has, that use there. And how would that work?
Well, they would be a legal non-conforming use when the zoning changed. So long as they continued on with that use, they can continue.
And not expand it?
Is that Barefoot Beach?
Yes.
They have a
That's the
lic,
only one that
they
I
have a
can,
liquor license?
not a liquor license, but I know that they have an open terrace
Oh, they have a
area.
rooftop, yeah,
The
area,
rooftop
right.
area.
But when I say bar, I mean a liquor license, a beer, wine,
They
whatever.
don't currently have one. They
No,
would
they
not be
don't
allowed.
They
currently
wouldn't be
have
able to get
one.
one. Good, okay, all right. So, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And that is the only example of an open area that exists there already, I think.
Do you get a lot of complaints from the residents?
We had someone here talking about that at one
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
but you still get.
I do.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They're just not, the people that live there and the people that go to the beach there, that's usually not where we have the big events, right?
Yeah.
Now, as we go north now, yes, but right there between, I think it's 131st and 133rd, isn't that where transitional is?
Yes.
Or
Andrew,
130, yeah, 133rd or 131st.
I think
It's very residential.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, just check.
Yep.
130.
Any further
I'm
comments?
still trying to figure out what is your definition of height? I know it starts from DFE, but where does it end where you say, maximum height, let's say 44 feet? Would it be to the top of the roof? I mean, if it's not a pitched roof, how do you measure height?
So we have it in there now, as the eave. So if it was a flat roof, it would be at the flat portion of the roof. But that's how it's written right now. Now in other zoning districts currently, it's to the highest point.
So when you say eave, let's say if we have flat roof, if there's a building that's got flat roof, right? Typically it's to the top of the roof. Where would the eave be in that case?
Maybe to the top of the roof.
Top of the roof, you call that
It's to
eave.
encourage more of like the gabled roofs, that are typical of what you think of like old Floridian fishing village.
I think it can be simplified if you say, for instance, height, and then you can use that definition to establish your step backs, at what elevation would you require the step backs to occur? If you say, all right, the height is measured from design high. In this particular case, I think we have a 4 feet of freeboard, right? Do we have? Yeah, so
Yes.
base flood elevation, whatever FEMA says that is, go above that 4 feet, that becomes your DFE design flood elevation, basically, and that's where the height is measured from. And then typically, if it's a flat roof, you go to the top of the roof. If it's a pitched roof, you go to the center of the pitch. And then, of course, you have you have ability to do a parapet wall, and even if you have an elevated shaft, those are kind of given over and above the elevation, the height requirements. But this really, it just creates a lot of questions, a lot of ambiguity, the way we're describing height. I think it needs to be simplified.
May I comment on that? Yeah, we had talked about that during our walk down there. And the idea of down at the Johns Pass Village is all these nice pitched roofs, and there's different variances, what the height is. And my concern is if you continue with a definition at the top of that roof, to try to squeeze in another story is my issue. We talked about using the term eave, which, in the case of a flat roof, in my opinion, shouldn't be the top of the roof. It should be at the ceiling height of the highest air-conditioned space. If you had storage up in the attic, that wouldn't be counted. But the highest occupied space, the ceiling height there, that's what we're talking about. We want to encourage these pitched roofs and I don't know the right terms, but the structures that, what do you, like the bell tower kind of thing. We want to encourage that because that's what brings the character to the village.
That would be a part of the architectural guidelines.
Well, yeah, but if we, my concern, if you use that definition of height at the top of the eave or the top of the roof or the middle, that's where it starts to, you start to play games with your design, your architecture, to be able to maybe gain an extra foot or two or an extra level. And that's what inspired me to kind of draw something up rudimentary that Marcy made this, this great drawing because it shows design flood elevation. So that's your base point. That's where we're talking about that's at ground zero, even though it's 14 feet above, base sea level, I guess it is. So if that's ground zero, and that's what, I wanted to kind of make sure that everyone was aware, okay, 30 feet is a three-story building. 28 feet is a three-story building. Right now, I think in the code if it's changed, we're not taking away anything from property owners, because right now, I think throughout the village, and correct me if I'm wrong, is 34 feet at the top of the roof.
In C1 zoning
In the
district.
C1, yeah. So whatever we do, we're going to add height. So we're giving that more value to the property owners. We're not taking away property rights. Now, to what extent is what the conversation is about. And I just thought a drawing like this kind of really helps with that conversation.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I understand where you're going with that, Commissioner. It's just that most zoning codes, describe it a little bit differently, but I understand your concern.
Okay. We will move on now to plan development amendments.
Okay, so in your packet, we have the PD plan development section in our code. We have become aware of some inconsistencies throughout our PD zoning district that really need to be resolved. So community development staff has gone through this and this is our very rough draft, but we wanted to get it to everyone here, just to start looking at, start thinking about. I know that it looks like there's a lot of underline and strike through. We still haven't gone through with other departments on this, but this is just kind of the starting point of what the community development staff has gone through and getting rid of those inconsistencies and issues that we have in this section. And then really updating it to current standards as well. And we also wanted to get a little um, recommendation from the board to see if you'd like to go forward with making the changes that we've recommended. And obviously, we'll workshop this more, or completely doing a complete revamp of the PD section. If we go that route, I would say we would need a consultant, an outside consultant. So just kind of getting your feedback on that as well.
Do we have any public comment? With no public comment, commission?
If the staff doesn't recommend necessarily getting an outside consultant, I mean, I'm fine with you continuing to hack through it. And bring us something with, that you feel will work in this situation. So that's the only thoughts I have on this subject.
The only thing I have is, really on the quantity and type of parking spaces and parking requirements. Back to the elevations here and, proposals down at Johns Pass Village and our earlier discussion of the parking garage. I think that, a lot of residents would push back and say, we don't need any more short-term, we don't need any hotels or that type of temporary lodging down in this space, but it is, you can do it. It's in the zoning. But by the time you put parking space on the second story, because you're mandated to have commercial on the first story, I believe, then that's not going to be done. So if I would open that up, that if the city were to provide that parking at their fee, and it may be, if it cost typically 25, what was the estimate on the parking garage? 2,500 per space? Whatever it would have,
25,000.
25,000 per space.
Yeah, probably
Okay,
closer
well-
to 30,000 now.
So that fee were to go to the city to build out some spaces, I would not be opposed of actually being able to have the city have that resource or that income, that bed tax. If it could be, an agreement could be worked out with the city on that. So I just put that out as a discussion item. Let's say a hotel were to be built down there in that commercial zone, and it was a 3-story building, just like this drawing, and they were able to hit their intensity and density levels that are mandated, and the city were to be able to get pretty much a guaranteed income from those parking spots. It's at least worth discussing. Does it make any sense? So I don't know if it makes any change in what you're doing here.
I think so if there was a plan development, that would probably be something that could be written into the development agreement. I would say not necessarily in the section that you were talking about. So section, what is that? Page 185 is just saying in the site plan, site data table, just showing how many parking spots you have. But that would be something more that would be discussed in a development agreement.
Okay, well,
What
it's
givebacks
covered.
do we get from the city
It's pretty open. It's a quantity and type of parking spaces and parking requirements is something that's a discussion item on the PD. It's not, it's very open.
And the Johns Pass Village Activity Center, it's kind of, you're technically allowed to rezone to a PD, but we've kind of de-incentivized it because we don't want taller buildings than what's been built currently. So we've really kind of de-incentivized doing a PD there, and because we want people to use the zoning we're proposing. But even a PD, if a PD was proposed down there, it would still have to meet what's in our special area plan, which is pretty strict also.
Well, in that example, would that be something that could be discussed without a PD? Let's say that they wanted to do temporary lodging and structure similar to what you have drawn here?
Possibly if they wanted to do the alternative temporary lodging use standards, which you can get higher density and intensity, you have to go through a development agreement process. So very similar. It's like a contract between the city and the developer.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm good. I think it looks, I mean, this is interesting to start, so it'll be good to see what you have moving forward.
And this will come back before as a workshop. So this isn't the last time that you'll see it. This is just the first time, the first draft. So we'll workshop this with Planning Commission, as well as internally with other city staff.
Oh, yeah, great, absolutely. Moving forward with the amendments and working with the planning commission. I think that's great.
Great, thanks.
Do you have anything?
The only part I'd like to add to PDs would be incentives. In other words, if the city is willing to give in some parts of the PD, then what could we get in return? As far as beautification, sidewalks, landscaping, the undulation and the step backs and all that.
Yeah, and right now it's quite open. You can see in, was it page 183, 184, it talks about the flexibility in setbacks and I think it's, 184 talks about, and it's basically bringing some of the language from section 110-386 and moving it over to allow that flexibility in setbacks and in height for enhancements, civic enhancements. We didn't want to make anything too specific because it would be on a case-by-case basis and depending on where it is. But if that's something that you want to enhance or create another section about that, more of those voluntary incentives to create more flexibility, that's something that we could definitely look into.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. We will move on to business tax receipt fee update.
Okay, we wanted to just show you the draft of the updates for the BTRs. I know that you've briefly talked about this. This would be an increase of 5%, and this has not been updated since 2014. So this just shows you what the ordinance will look like with that 5% increase.
Do we have any public comment? No public comment, commission?
I think we should move forward with increasing the BTR.
Pardon my ignorance. Is this something that's charged annually?
Yes, it is.
And this is just to be able to do business within the city limits?
Yes.
It's the old occupational license. A number of years ago, they changed it to be labeled business tax receipt, but it is an occupational license.
Thank you.
Anything? Bruce, do you have any questions?
I have a question. How do we check on businesses as far as BTR, probably more specifically, the overnight accommodations or places where, you know, if we are creating areas where we're encouraging overnight accommodation or, you know,
Are you asking how we track whether or not someone has
yes,
purchased this?
yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we have computer software now that tracks and flags.
Well-
Correct?
Yes, and then we'll be working with a new software soon, the next coming months for BTRs as well. The same software that we use for our permitting system.
So let's say if there's a short-term rental, they would need to have a BTR, right?
Yes,
If
that's
it's,
correct.
if it's legal.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
true.
That's what I'm.
So
yeah,
we,
that's-
we check and we'll look at addresses pretty regularly. Now, if they're allowed, if they're gonna rent it, there is a BTR, there's also a rental registration and an inspection, I think every other year, if I'm correct, but
Mhm.
I mean, staff checks to make sure, so when we get addresses, we will see if they've obtained one. If not, they receive a letter stating that they must obtain their business tax and or rental registration. That goes for any business within the city. Obviously, a brick and mortar or structure, we can observe that. But if a unit in a condo all of a sudden started renting and they're allowed to overnight rent, how would we know that? There's a variety of, I mean, you can, and we'll have to make sure, determine if we're doing this, but you can download reports, for example, from the state Sunbiz, where you register your LLC or your corporations. And typically, close to 100% of businesses do register there. So that's the first place that most people begin. So you can download a report and it'll give you the address, and then you can match the address with our system to see if they've obtained one. Again, we're fairly small, so we could probably check every single address to determine that. And we'll make sure that we're doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Community Development.
Thank you. Great job.
So we'll move on to Finance. Ordinance 2024-16, Fees and Collection Manual Update Number 2, Fiscal Year 2024.
Thank you. So just to give you some background, typically annually, finance solicits from the other departments any updates, additions, deletions, modifications that are requested to the city's fees and collections manual. Typically, we do this once a year around this time, go through the workshop process as we're doing, and then go through passage of the ordinance through 2 readings, so that by the beginning of the next fiscal year in October, by October 1st, those new fees are in place. We did update this one earlier in May or in April at the request of the Building Services Department to add a building safety milestone report review fee of $250. So we've already gone through this process, but this one is kind of the catch-all, capturing all departmental requests. You see here we have from Development Services, Finance Department, specifically parking fee increase from $3 to $4, Fire Department, rental inspection fee, and then Municipal Marina, transient wet slip dry storage rental fee updates. So all of those updates are track changes within the Exhibit A, the Fee and Collection Manual Update. And if you're comfortable with moving forward to this, we'll put this on in the next meeting, in the first reading and an ordinance. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Do we have any public comment? Public comment, commission?
I have no questions.
you have any?
We move forward to approve the ordinance.
No, we're not doing that yet. We're just asking, yeah. I do have a question, and it's just based off of, some feedback that I have received from the community on some of our fees for the site plan and redevelopment process. My question would be, and I don't know that there's anyone here that can answer it. We had a 300, never mind. I do not. Other than on the first removal, site plan submittal at the $1,000. So we're going to not charge a preliminary and not charge an additional. So if they have to come back in for an additional, that's going to be at no charge.
Correct.
Correct?
It's just a flat one-time $1,000 fee for the intermediate level.
Yep,
That threshold. And if it's a major, it's just a one-time
one-time. fee,
$2,000,
2,000.
right? So
And
we won't
then-
have to go back and try to track and.
So if they have issues and they have to resubmit, we're not going to keep
Correct.
charging them. I think that is fantastic.
Correct.
A lot of work for our team, but I also would like to give a shout out that community development has done a fantastic job of working with residents and businesses that come in for help with their plans. I sat in on a day where they had the open, I've actually sat in twice when they had open hours where residents or contractors could come in. And the first time I sat in, a contractor came in and they had issues. They worked through everything in that meeting. And they complimented that Madeira Beach was the only city that offered that service, that you could go in and sit down. And I thought it was, they were very, very happy. And I thought it was a great compliment. And it was nice to see how the team worked with them. And then I sat in on another day where the resident came and they did nothing more but provide information to the resident on the resident's property. And it was very nice to be a part of that and to see firsthand how helpful they are to the residents and contractors that are working within the city. And I know that anyone who is permitting right now is going to love that we remove these fees. So I think this is fantastic. That's all. Then we will move on to enterprise fleet management vehicle purchases.
Okay, more background on this one as well. The city entered into back in 2019, and this was orchestrated by my predecessor, a arrangement with Enterprise Fleet Management to lease a number of vehicles. And while this was well-intended, I don't think it had the desired effect that, based on my feedback from various department heads on how to manage vehicle purchase and replacement within the city. The intention was about a 5-year lease and then turn the vehicles in and get a brand new vehicle and continue on a perpetual basis. But some challenges faced were, one, just the process to submit the vehicles for repair and maintenance was a little clunky compared to our in-house mechanic that can do things like oil changes maybe a little more efficiently, speedily compared to going through the process with Enterprise. Also, the life on these vehicles are typically longer than 5 years. We like to break them in and keep them as long as possible. And so after that 5-year period, the sentiment generally is that the department heads that may have these vehicles would just like to keep them at least another few years. Thirdly, and a buy versus lease scenario, I'm always a fan of buying instead of leasing to save on interest costs. If one, we've got sufficient cash to do so, and two, the interest cost to lease outweighs the interest income that we could otherwise receive on our investments. And if that duration is longer, like that 7, 8, 9, even possibly 10 years, to me, it always makes more sense to buy versus lease. And that's a lot of the feedback that I've received from the departments. They'd rather, instead of being on a fixed 5-year cycle, make those decisions to replace vehicles as needed. and typically look to purchase, but also I'll run the numbers and say, does it make sense in this case to finance, given the rate that we'll be incurring the financing cost of this vehicle versus what we could earn on our investments, and we perform that analysis at each option to purchase. With that said, what we'd like to do, since these vehicles are nearing around the end of their lease term, I've laid out in the memo that the departments would like to purchase based on the remaining residual book value, which is not high, less than $5,000 or $6,000 per vehicle, and just try to maintain these vehicles for a period of, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 years longer, until at that time we can sell, scrap the vehicle, and purchase a new. So nothing, we just wanted to, nothing that we need to approve formally through any kind of passage of a resolution or ordinance. We just want to run this plan by you all, get your concurrence, and then move forward with Enterprise on consummating that purchase transaction.
Do we have any public comment? With no public comment, Commission?
I recommend purchasing the remaining vehicles from Enterprise Fleet Management.
I second that.
I'm in favor of purchasing as well.
Makes sense.
I agree.
And did I mention, I didn't orchestrate this, I just inherited this.
Yes. I remember when they did this, and it didn't make sense to me at the time because leasing makes sense for some people, but in our case, I didn't understand why it was wanted. Even coming to the meetings and listening to it, it didn't make sense, not on the scale of how we use vehicles. And it just, so good job to move on.
I think scale, that's a perfect point. I think scale makes the big difference. If you're
Yeah.
a larger entity with a more sizable fleet, have that, and especially public safety vehicles where the useful life might be a little less. But, I think we do a good job internally of taking care of our own vehicles. And there's a lot of retrofittings, different types of outfitting of those vehicles. So have to change that out every 5 years. It just makes sense to buy and hold and maintain the best you can.
Well, and we have a fantastic in-house mechanic,
That helps.
so thank you very much.
All right. Appreciate that.
We'll move on to approval of section 125 plan document.
Okay, so just to give you some background on this, Section 125 plan, also known as a cafeteria plan. This is the formal document that we're putting, a plan document that we're putting in front of you. The intention here is just to codify that document and approve via resolution so that we have it clear in writing through commission approval. And this just covers a variety of aspects according to, that meet the regulations of IRC Section 125, cover things like eligibility, participation in the plan, and then the benefits themselves and how what the treatment is of those benefits, albeit on a pre-tax or post-tax basis. So this is just a formality that we'd like to go through to have that plan, this updated plan document that was prepared, and formalize that through a resolution that we'll be bringing to you in the next regular meeting for approval of this Section 125 cafeteria plan that we now have in writing through approval via resolution. So that's just what we intend on doing, and want to run that by you in case you had any concerns. Otherwise, that'll be the plan for the next regular meeting.
Do we have any public comment? Having no public comment, Commission?
No comment.
No comment.
As there's no additional costs incurred, I recommend, I'm in favor of approving the section 125 plan.
Yes, just to clarify this, we're not changing benefits in any case. So this isn't an additional cost to the city at all.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So we'll move on to Public Works, RFP 2024-06, City Facility Cleaning Services.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. What I bring before you today is the RFP for the city cleaning This is citywide, all facilities, which includes City Hall, Rec Center, Fire Department, all the public bathrooms. The reason for this is because the contract with all the amendments expired. It expired back in May, but we went out to bid and then we canceled bids due to a lot of confusion on the bid tabulation sheet. So the reason for the confusion is obviously all the locations listed out, but in the public restrooms, Archibald, Tom and Kitty Stewart Park, Johns Pass Park, and Johns Pass Village, sorry. Those are cleaned twice a day, 7 months out of the year. So I corrected the bid tabulation and we went out to bid again. With this, we received quite a few submissions. We narrowed that down to 3, and then we conducted interviews between the 3 that scored the highest out of the evaluations. Our recommendation is to move forward with American Janitorial. The current contract this is actually a savings to the city of what we are currently paying. We are currently paying $150,440 annually. That covers all locations. The new cost will be $136,319.40. With the exception, that is just the base annual cost. That does not include any emergencies or any extra cleanings that may be required for special events or you never know what happens in those public bathrooms. So with that being said, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any public comment? With no public comment, commission questions?
Just a couple questions. What is it, was there something, what is it about American Janitorial Incorporated that rose them to the top? Was there something in particular, or was it the low cost? What was it?
Honestly, if you read through the submittal, and I believe I included that, they're very streamlined. When we met with the company, they brought their lead person, that manager. They have an app that for me is checks and balances. Currently, right now, sometimes things are forgotten or not done, but this app makes sure that everything on that checklist is done. And if they leave that space, they are then notified that they need to go back and clean that or that they missed something. Honestly, their costs did have a lot to do with it, but just the way that they presented themselves was really, really good.
Sounds like they're pretty efficient, so I would take your recommendation then.
All 4 of us that were in the interview felt that way, yes.
How much was that cost again?
For the new, $136,319.44. And I mean, if anybody would like, I have the breakdown per location. And I actually think it might be in the
It is.
submittal.
I'm looking at it actually, and actually, Megan, you got us a great deal. I mean, compared to some of these other cities.
Yeah, these guys have a lot of major contracts. They actually do PSTA, which I had no idea actually how that trash was cleaned up at the bus stops. Now I know. But they have major
City of Dunedin.
contracts, yes, and their references were outstanding. Ally
Fantastic.
did a reference check.
I would agree. So fantastic.
Thank you.
Do they have their own insurance?
Yes, we require significant insurance, and that's all in the submittal as well.
Thank you.
So the old company that charged us $150,000 a year, that did not include emergencies either, did it?
No, ma'am.
Right. Nope. I don't have any further questions, do you?
What is the bid tabulation on page 295 that says 160,000? Is there something that's?
That was a confusing part again. So there is, with the bid, we're gonna get a new bathroom at Archibald, so the square footage is going to double. So I wanted to ensure that we were getting both of those costs. And then the potential for Pinellas County Park bathrooms. I wanted those numbers so that in the event we do get that restroom, that we already have that number, that we don't have to go out to bid. So what they did was they added every single one of those line items. But if you subtract out the county park and the second Archibald bathroom, that's where the 136 comes from.
Makes perfect sense. You recommend them and it's a savings?
Yes.
It's a win-win in my book.
I agree.
And we would start the new contract September 1st.
Do we have anything more?
Yeah. we can, yeah.
It is 8:54. We are adjourned.